My name is Joe Wilson, 68 years old, and I never thought I'd have to outsmart my own family to survive. When I moved in with my son and his wife after my Eleanor passed, I believed I was among people who loved me. Then came that winter morning when I overheard my daughter-in-law whispering their plan to throw me out after Christmas. Instead of confronting them, I smiled and started planning. If you're watching this, take a moment to subscribe and like this video before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into justice. I spent 40 years as a mechanical engineer at Franklin Industries in Pittsburgh. Good, honest work designing industrial cooling systems. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well enough to give my family a comfortable life. Eleanor and I bought our modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs back in 1979 for just $40,000. We raised our only son, Thomas, there, and planned to grow old together in that house. Eleanor was the love of my life for 43 years. We met at a church picnic when we were both 23, and I knew right away she was special. She had this laugh that could light up a room, and she never met a stranger she couldn't turn into a friend. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the doctors gave her 6 months. My strong-willed Eleanor fought for almost 2 years before she finally couldn't fight anymore. Thomas was always a bright kid, a bit quiet, maybe took after me that way. Eleanor was worried he was too serious growing up, but I told her he just had an old soul. He did well in school, got his business degree from Penn State, and landed a good job at an investment firm in town. I was proud of him. He called every Sunday without fail, even through college. Once he started his career, though, those calls got shorter, and sometimes he'd forget. I understood. Life gets busy. 8 years ago, Thomas called on a Tuesday night instead of Sunday. That was unusual enough that I thought something was wrong. But no, he was calling to tell me he'd met someone, Amanda. He was 42 at the time and had never been married. Had a few girlfriends over the years, but nothing that stuck. So Eleanor and I were thrilled. Amanda worked in the marketing department at Thomas's company. She was 38, divorced, no kids. Their courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months after that Tuesday call, they were engaged. Eleanor and I found it fast, but Thomas seemed happy, and that's what mattered. At the engagement dinner, I remember Amanda being utterly charming. She asked about our lives, complimented Eleanor's necklace, and seemed genuinely interested in my boring engineering stories. She had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. Still, Eleanor had her concerns. "There's something calculated about her," she whispered to me in bed that night. The way she kept steering the conversation back to how successful Thomas is, how nice our house is. "I don't know, Joe. I hope I'm wrong." I kissed her forehead and told her she was just being protective of our boy. The wedding was lovely, if a bit lavish for my taste. Amanda wanted the works, and Thomas seemed happy to give it to her. They bought a 4-bedroom colonial in the same suburb where Thomas grew up, not 10 miles from our place. Life went on. We'd have them over for Sunday dinner every month or so. Thomas got promoted. Amanda started her own marketing consultancy. They seemed happy enough. When Eleanor got sick, Amanda sent flowers and a card, but rarely visited. Thomas came by more often, usually alone, saying Amanda was busy with work. Eleanor never complained, but I could tell it hurt her. "Family should show up," she'd say quietly. I couldn't disagree. After Eleanor passed, the house felt empty. Too many rooms full of memories and not enough life. The medical bills had taken a chunk out of our savings, too. We had insurance, but cancer is expensive, even with coverage. I was $76,000 in debt by the time it was all over. It was Thomas who suggested I sell the house and move in with them. "You shouldn't be alone, Dad," he said. And their house was way too big for just 2 people. Amanda nodded enthusiastically beside him. "We have that spare bedroom on the main floor," she added. "You wouldn't even have to deal with stairs." I was reluctant at first. I valued my independence, but the debt was weighing on me, and the thought of rattling around in that empty house was pretty bleak, so I agreed. We worked out a deal where I'd contribute $175,000 from my house sale toward their mortgage in exchange for a place to live. The house was paid off, and after settling Eleanor's medical bills and funeral costs, I still had about $300,000 left for retirement. Not rich by any means, but I thought it would be enough if I was careful. The first 6 months living with Thomas and Amanda were fine, pleasant even. I kept to myself, tried to be helpful without being intrusive. I'd do the yard work while they were at the office, sometimes have dinner ready when they got home. Amanda seemed to appreciate it, or at least she said she did. I'd watch my grandkids when they needed a sitter, though that wasn't often. Thomas and Amanda preferred to hire a professional nanny for 7-year-old Lucas and 5-year-old Sophie. The changes were subtle at first. Amanda would rearrange my belongings in the kitchen to make things more organized. She'd forget to call me down for dinner, then act surprised when I appeared in the doorway. "Oh, Joe, I didn't think you'd want to join us tonight." Small things, easily dismissed. Thomas started working later and later. When he was home, he'd retreat to his home office or the basement workshop. Our conversations grew shorter, less frequent. When I tried to talk to him about sports or current events, topics we'd always enjoyed discussing, he'd seem distracted, checking his phone or offering only one-word responses. I tried to contribute more, thinking maybe they felt I wasn't pulling my weight. I took over all the yard maintenance, planted a vegetable garden, even repainted the deck. But nothing seemed good enough for Amanda. "The grass is cut too short," she'd say. Or, "Those aren't the vegetables we usually buy." Every contribution met with criticism. New house rules appeared seemingly overnight. "Please don't use the kitchen after 8 p.m., Joe. The noise disturbs our sleep." Their bedroom was on the second floor, clear across the house. "We'd prefer if you didn't have visitors without giving us 24 hours notice." I hadn't had a visitor in months. The living room television is really for family use in the evenings. I was family, wasn't I? When I tried to discuss my concerns with Thomas, he'd brush them off. "Amanda just likes things a certain way, Dad. You know how she is." But I didn't. Not really. The Amanda I was living with seemed very different from the charming woman who'd visited our home years before. Then came the day I overheard Amanda on the phone with her friend Stephanie. I was coming in from the garden and paused in the mudroom to remove my shoes, as per house rules. Amanda was in the kitchen, unaware of my presence. "No, it's not working out," she was saying. "He's always underfoot, criticizes everything I do. Thomas is finally seeing what a burden his father is. We never should have agreed to this arrangement." I stood frozen, shoes in hand. Was that how they saw me? A burden? I quietly retreated outside, put my gardening tools away, then made a show of coming in noisily. Amanda was all smiles when I entered the kitchen this time. "How's the garden coming along, Joe?" she asked sweetly. I smiled back and lied that it was coming along just fine. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when I first noticed something truly wrong. I was expecting a letter from my old work buddy Frank in Arizona. We still sent actual letters sometimes, old-fashioned that way. The mail had come, and I saw Frank's familiar handwriting on an envelope in the stack on the entryway table. But when I picked it up, I realized it had already been opened and then resealed, not very carefully at that. That same week, I couldn't find my latest bank statement. I always kept them in a folder in my desk drawer, but the August statement was missing. When I mentioned it casually at dinner, Amanda quickly responded, "Oh, I think I saw that. Probably got mixed in with our mail. I'll look for it." The statement never reappeared. But the moment that truly opened my eyes came 3 months before Christmas. I was coming back from an early morning walk, a habit I'd developed to get out of the house during Amanda's morning routine. As I approached the side door, I heard Amanda's voice through the partially open kitchen window. "No, listen," she was saying to someone on the phone. "After Christmas, the old man is gone. We've already started looking at facilities. Thomas finally agrees it's for the best." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My legs nearly gave out beneath me, the old man. That's how she referred to me. And Thomas agreed? My own son was planning to ship me off somewhere after the holidays? I didn't confront them. Something told me that would be a mistake. Instead, I went in through the front door, made some noise hanging up my jacket, and walked into the kitchen with a practiced smile. Amanda ended her call abruptly when I entered. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I said casually. She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions and a growing sense of dread. Had I misunderstood? Was I jumping to conclusions? But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. They were planning to get rid of me after Christmas. The next day, I went to the hardware store and bought a small digital voice recorder. Nothing fancy, just enough to capture conversations clearly. I felt a bit like a spy in one of those movies Thomas used to love as a kid. Except this wasn't a game. This was my life. I placed the recorder in my bedroom, hidden between some books on my nightstand. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I needed to know what was happening behind my back. 2 days later, I got my first confirmation. I was at the community center playing chess with some other retirees when the recorder caught Amanda entering my room. I could hear her opening drawers, rustling through papers. "Where does he keep them?" she muttered to herself. The recording captured the sound of more drawers opening and closing before she finally left. What was she looking for? I did a careful inventory of my room but couldn't immediately tell if anything was missing. Then I remembered my financial documents. I kept copies of my bank statements, investment accounts, and Social Security information in a box at the back of my closet. When I checked, the box had been moved, and several documents were out of order. Worried now, I went online to check my bank account. I hadn't adopted online banking readily, but Eleanor had insisted we learn before she passed. "The world's changing, Joe," she'd said. "We need to keep up." Thank God for Eleanor's foresight. What I found sent a chill through me. There were withdrawals I hadn't made. Small amounts at first, $100 or $200 here and there, going back almost a year. Then larger sums, $500, $1,000. The most recent was $3,000, withdrawn just last week. I called the bank immediately, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. The customer service representative pulled up my account and confirmed the withdrawals had been made in person, with proper identification. When I explained that I hadn't made them, she checked further. "It looks like these were authorized using your power of attorney," she said. "The withdrawals were made by Thomas Wilson." Thomas, my son. I remembered signing a power of attorney form after Eleanor died. "Just in case something happens to you, Dad," Thomas had explained, "so I can help manage your affairs." I'd trusted him completely. Over the next 2 weeks, I pieced together the extent of their betrayal. $47,000 had been systematically taken from my accounts over the past year. My Social Security checks, which should have been deposited directly into my account, had been rerouted to a joint account I didn't recognize. My credit card showed charges for things I'd never purchased, including a $3,000 TV that certainly wasn't in my bedroom. One night, I positioned my recorder near the heating vent in my room, which connected to their home office upstairs. Their voices came through with surprising clarity. "The Lakeside place is already full," Amanda was saying. "They have a waiting list. But Sunny Valley has an opening in January." "That's more expensive," Thomas replied. "Almost $4,000 a month." "Your dad's money is almost gone anyway," Amanda said, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. "We need to get rid of him before he becomes a burden. We can sell that beat-up car of his. That'll cover the first month's payment. After that, his Social Security should handle most of it." "I don't know," Thomas sounded hesitant. "Shouldn't we discuss this with him first? And have him get all emotional? You know how he is. He'll make us feel guilty, then dig in his heels. Better to present it as a done deal at Christmas. Tell him it's for his own good, that we've already put down the deposit. He won't make a scene in front of the family." There was a long pause before Thomas spoke again. "I guess you're right. It is getting harder having him here." "Of course I'm right. Your father had his life. Now it's our turn. We need our space back, and I'm tired of watching every word I say in my own home." I turned off the recorder, my hands shaking. I couldn't bear to hear more. That night I cried for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. Not just for myself, but for Thomas. What had happened to the boy we raised? Had he always been capable of this kind of betrayal, or was it Amanda's influence? And did it even matter anymore? The next day, I searched Thomas's home office while they were at work. I found brochures for 3 different assisted living facilities, all with handwritten notes about costs and available rooms. I also found bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to theirs and a folder containing information about my investments, including account numbers I'd never given them. The final piece fell into place when I discovered they'd been accessing my investment account online. They'd somehow obtained my password and had been researching how to liquidate my remaining assets. According to the browser history on Thomas's computer, they'd been looking into this just yesterday. In that moment, standing in my son's office surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, something changed inside me. The hurt and shock began to transform into something else. Determination, resolve. I might be old, but I wasn't helpless. And I certainly wasn't going to let them steal my dignity along with my money. The first person I called was Martin Goldstein. We'd worked together at Franklin Industries for 30 years before he left engineering to become a corporate attorney. He'd retired 5 years ago but still kept his license active. More importantly, he was the most trustworthy person I knew outside my family, which suddenly seemed like a crucial distinction. "Joe, this is elder abuse, plain and simple," Martin said after I laid out the situation in his living room, recorder and financial documents spread across his coffee table. "Financial exploitation by a family member. It's not just immoral, it's illegal." "I don't want Thomas to go to jail," I said quickly. The thought of my son in prison, despite everything, was unbearable. I just want to protect what's left of my money and find a new place to live. Martin adjusted his glasses, his expression grave. "I understand that, Joe. But you need to look at this objectively. They've stolen nearly $50,000 from you. They're planning to force you into a facility against your will. You contributed a substantial sum toward their mortgage. You have rights, and they've violated them systematically." He helped me organize my evidence, cataloging bank statements, recordings, and documents in a meticulous system. He explained that the recordings might not be admissible in court since Pennsylvania required two-party consent for recordings, but they still established a pattern that could be investigated further. "The financial documents are the smoking gun," Martin explained. "Those withdrawals without your knowledge or consent, despite the power of attorney, constitute financial elder abuse. The power of attorney gives Thomas the right to act in your best interest, not to enrich himself." Next, Martin helped me understand my rights regarding the house. "You put in $175,000 toward their mortgage. Was there any written agreement about this?" I nodded. "Thomas drafted something. Said it was to protect both of us. It states that in exchange for my contribution, I have the right to live there for the remainder of my life, or until I choose to leave voluntarily." Martin's eyebrows rose. "May I see this document?" When I showed him, he studied it carefully, then smiled. "Thomas may have outsmarted himself here. This essentially gives you a life estate in a portion of the property, which is a form of ownership interest. Depending on how it's worded, you might actually have the right to sell your interest." Over the next week, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Martin to understand exactly where I stood. After accounting for the money Thomas and Amanda had already taken, I had approximately $240,000 left in various accounts. Not as much as I'd thought, but still enough to start over if I was careful. I also consulted a real estate attorney about my options regarding the house. She confirmed Martin's assessment. "Based on this document and your financial contribution, you have what's called a life estate in the property. You can't sell the entire house without Thomas and Amanda's agreement, but you can sell your interest in it." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means someone could buy your right to live there for the rest of your life. It's not as valuable as full ownership, of course, but it's still worth something, especially since your contribution was substantial compared to the home's value." I thought about this carefully. Could I sell this interest without Thomas knowing? The attorney considered this. "You'd need to find a buyer willing to enter into an unusual arrangement. But yes, technically, you could transfer your interest without their knowledge until the paperwork is filed. At that point, they'd be legally notified." This gave me an idea. A way to not only secure my future but to deliver a kind of justice that felt appropriate. I began searching for apartments in a senior living community across town. Not an assisted living facility like the ones Thomas and Amanda had been investigating, but an independent living community where I could have my own space while still having access to services and companionship. I found a one-bedroom unit at Riverside Meadows, a well-maintained community for people 55 and older. The rent was manageable on my remaining savings and Social Security income. I put down a deposit and arranged to move in the week after Christmas. Next, I started secretly moving my most important possessions to a small storage unit I rented near the new apartment. Photo albums, Eleanor's jewelry, my collection of first-edition mystery novels, the things that truly mattered to me. I moved them a few at a time when Thomas and Amanda were at work, so they wouldn't notice anything missing. Meanwhile, I contacted the police department to report the financial abuse. Detective Laura Jenkins specialized in crimes against seniors and listened to my story with professional concern. "Unfortunately, Mr. Wilson, these cases are all too common," she said. "Family members are the most frequent perpetrators of elder financial abuse. The good news is that you've done an excellent job documenting everything. I explained that I wanted to confront Thomas and Amanda myself before pressing charges. Detective Jenkins was hesitant at first, but understood my desire to give my son one chance to make things right. We agreed that she and another officer would come to the house on Christmas Day after I had revealed what I knew. "Just to be clear," Detective Jenkins said, "we'll be there to ensure your safety and to formally document the situation, but whether to press charges will ultimately be your decision." The final piece of my plan came together when I found a buyer for my life estate interest in the house. Ironically, it was Amanda's nemesis from the neighborhood, Karen Blackwell. Karen and Amanda had been locked in a passive-aggressive feud over everything from fence boundaries to holiday decorations since Thomas and Amanda moved in. Karen was recently divorced and looking for a new place. When I explained the situation, leaving out the more personal details, she was intrigued by the opportunity to purchase a stake in the property at below market value. "So I would have the legal right to live in the house?" she asked. "A portion of it, yes," I confirmed. "You'd be taking over my right to occupy the space for my lifetime, which in this case, since I'm choosing to leave, transfers to you." Karen's smile had a hint of mischief. "And Thomas and Amanda would have to accept this? They couldn't just sell the house or evict me?" "Not without buying out your interest first," I confirmed. "And you'd be within your rights to set the price for that buyout." We struck a deal, with the paperwork to be finalized the day after Christmas. Karen agreed to pay $100,000 for my interest, which was less than I'd put in but still enough to supplement my remaining savings significantly. As a final touch, I purchased a large SOLD sign to place in the yard after my revelation. As Christmas approached, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. I hated the thought of confronting Thomas, of seeing the moment he realized I knew everything. But I also felt stronger than I had in months. I was taking control back, standing up for myself. I thought Eleanor would be proud. Living under the same roof with people you know are plotting against you is its own special kind of hell. Every smile feels like a lie, every casual conversation a performance. But I was determined to maintain the facade until Christmas, to give nothing away. Thanksgiving came first, a dress rehearsal of sorts for the larger Christmas gathering. Amanda invited her parents, her sister, and Thomas's cousin Paul and his family. I watched with a detached fascination as she played the perfect hostess and doting daughter-in-law. "Joe has been having some memory issues lately," she confided to her mother, just loudly enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "We're looking into some options for more support." She sighed dramatically. "It's so hard watching someone decline, isn't it?" I nearly laughed out loud. I'd forgotten where I put my reading glasses earlier that week, and suddenly I was suffering cognitive decline. I bit my tongue and continued slicing the pie I'd baked, Eleanor's old recipe. Let them think what they wanted for now. Thomas was different around family, more attentive to me, asking loudly about how I was feeling, if I needed anything. The performance was almost convincing, except for the way his eyes slid away from mine when he thought no one was looking. My sister Marge visited for a weekend in early December. She'd flown in from Florida, where she'd retired years ago. Sharper than a tack at 74, Marge noticed immediately that something was off. "What's going on with you and Thomas?" she asked bluntly, as we sat in a coffee shop downtown, away from the house. "There's enough tension in that house to snap a steel cable." I considered telling her everything but decided against it. Marge had a protective streak a mile wide and would likely confront Thomas on the spot. "Just some adjustments to living together," I said vaguely. "You know how it is. Different generations, different expectations." She didn't buy it for a second. "Joseph William Wilson, I've known you your entire life. You're planning something. I can see it in your eyes." I smiled. "If I am, you'll hear all about it after Christmas. Just trust me on this one, Margie." She studied my face, then nodded slowly. "All right. But you call me the minute you need backup? You hear me?" Throughout December, Amanda became increasingly bold about the coming changes. "We're thinking of turning your room into a home office after the holidays," she mentioned casually over breakfast one morning. "There's a lovely place across town that has an opening. Very nice community." "Is that so?" I responded, keeping my voice neutral. "Sounds interesting." "Oh, it is. They have activities, outings. You'd never be lonely." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We can go see it together after Christmas. They're holding a spot for you." "How thoughtful," I replied, fighting to keep the sarcasm from my voice. The hardest part was maintaining my relationship with my grandkids, Lucas and Sophie. They were innocent in all this, and I didn't want my issues with their parents to affect them. I took Lucas fishing one Saturday, just the two of us at the small lake in the community park. "Are you going away, Grandpa?" he asked as we sat waiting for the fish to bite. "Mom said you might be moving to a special place for old people." My heart clenched. "I might be moving, buddy, but not too far. We'll still see each other. Promise?" His 7-year-old face was serious. "Cross my heart," I said, making the gesture over my chest like I used to do when Thomas was small. "Some things might change, but I'll always be your grandpa." As Christmas approached, I had several sleepless nights, not from worry about my plan, but from trying to understand how we'd gotten here. Where had I gone wrong with Thomas? Was this somehow my fault? Had I been too strict, too lenient, too absent during his childhood? I replayed moments from his youth, searching for clues I might have missed. In the end, I realized it didn't matter. Whatever factors had shaped Thomas into the man he was today, he was still responsible for his choices, and I was responsible for mine. I would not be a victim in this story. I would not go quietly to some facility while they enjoyed the fruits of my life's work. Christmas Eve dinner was a tense affair, though I doubted Thomas or Amanda noticed. They were too wrapped up in their own excitement about the coming changes. I caught them exchanging glances several times, little smiles that spoke volumes. Tomorrow, they thought. Tomorrow we'll be free of the old man. After dinner, I excused myself to make final preparations. I checked my recording equipment one last time and packed an overnight bag that I hid in the trunk of my car. I'd be leaving directly after the confrontation, spending the night at a hotel before moving into my new apartment 2 days later. As I set up the projector in the living room, concealing it under a blanket for now, I found myself surprisingly calm. There was a certain peace in finally bringing secrets into the light. Whatever happened tomorrow, the lies would end. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Eleanor. "Am I doing the right thing, Ellie?" I whispered into the darkness. I could almost hear her reply. "Stand up for yourself, Joe. You deserve better than this." With that thought, I drifted off to sleep, ready to face Christmas morning and whatever it would bring. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow that had fallen overnight. For a moment, lying in bed, I could almost pretend it was just another holiday. Then I remembered what day it really was, the day everything would change. I rose early, before anyone else, and made coffee. I set up my final recording devices discreetly around the living room, where we would be opening presents. One in the bookshelf, partially hidden by a family photo, another beneath the coffee table. The projector was ready, connected to my laptop, which contained copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. Thomas and Amanda came downstairs around 7:30, already dressed in matching Christmas sweaters. The kids thundered down behind them, excited about Santa's visit. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said cheerfully, handing Thomas a cup of coffee prepared exactly how he liked it, with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. Just like I'd done every Christmas morning since he was old enough to drink coffee. "Merry Christmas, Dad," he replied, a hint of awkwardness in his voice. Did I detect a note of guilt there too? Maybe. Or maybe I was just hoping there was still some conscience left in my son. Amanda was all smiles. "The cinnamon rolls are almost ready," she announced. "Then we can open presents." The morning proceeded like a carefully choreographed dance. The kids opened their gifts first, exclaiming over new toys and games. Then the adults exchanged presents. I had been thoughtful with my gifts, despite everything. A leather-bound journal for Thomas, similar to one I'd given him when he graduated college. A silk scarf for Amanda in her favorite shade of blue. Small gestures that somehow felt important. A last attempt to reach the people I'd thought they were. Amanda's thanks were effusive and obviously fake. "Oh, Joe, it's lovely." "You shouldn't have." She set the scarf aside without trying it on. Later, I watched her whisper to Thomas near the kitchen doorway, thinking I couldn't hear. "After today, we'll kick him out for good." The Sunny Valley people confirmed they're holding the room. Thomas nodded, glancing in my direction. I pretended to be occupied with helping Sophie with her new puzzle. The moment had come. I cleared my throat. "Before we start clearing up all this wrapping paper, I have one more special gift for everyone." Amanda looked confused. "Another gift? You've been too generous already, Joe." I smiled, the expression feeling strange on my face. "This one's special, something I've been working on for a while." I moved to the corner of the room and pulled the blanket off the projector. Thomas frowned. "Dad, what's this about?" "Just a little presentation. A family retrospective, you might say." I connected my laptop and dimmed the lights. "Everyone get comfortable." Amanda laughed nervously. "Is this really necessary right now? We should probably start getting ready for dinner. People will be arriving in a few hours." "This won't take long," I said calmly, pressing play on the first video file. "In fact, I think you'll find it quite illuminating." The projector flickered to life, showing footage from one of my hidden cameras. There was Amanda, clearly visible, searching through my desk drawers while I was out of the house. The timestamp in the corner showed this was from just 3 weeks ago. The room went silent. Amanda's laugh died in her throat. "What is this?" Thomas asked, his voice tight. I didn't answer, just let the video play. Next came audio recordings. Amanda's voice crystal clear. "Your dad's money is almost gone anyway. We need to get rid of him before he becomes a burden." Then Thomas, "I guess you're right. It is getting harder having him here." I clicked to the next slide, displaying bank statements with the unauthorized withdrawals highlighted. $47,000, I said quietly, taken from my accounts without my knowledge or consent. Amanda stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Thomas, turn this off right now." Thomas didn't move. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. "Dad, I can explain," he began. "Please do," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Explain why you've been stealing from me for the past year. Explain why you're planning to force me into a facility against my will. Explain why you've betrayed every principle your mother and I ever taught you." Amanda tried to shut down the projector. "This is absurd. You're manipulating things, taking them out of context." I clicked to the next slide. Screenshots of nursing home websites with user accounts in Thomas's name. Emails between Thomas and facility administrators discussing my declining condition and the need for memory care, despite no doctor ever diagnosing me with any cognitive issues. "The context seems pretty clear to me," I said. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime incongruous with the tension in the room. Amanda jumped. "That must be my parents," she said. "Thomas, deal with this. I'll get the door." "It's not your parents," I said calmly. "They're not due for another 3 hours, according to the schedule you put on the refrigerator." I walked to the door myself and opened it to reveal Detective Jenkins and Officer Rodriguez. "Good morning, officers," I said. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." Thomas stood frozen in the living room, the evidence of his betrayal still projected on the wall behind him. "Dad, you called the police?" "I did," I confirmed. "Detective Jenkins specializes in elder abuse cases. I've already filed a report about the financial exploitation. She's here to discuss next steps and ensure everything proceeds legally." Amanda rushed forward, suddenly all charm and confusion. "There must be some misunderstanding, officers. Joe has been having some memory issues lately. He gets confused about financial matters." Detective Jenkins was professional, but firm. "Mrs. Wilson, we have reviewed extensive documentation of unauthorized withdrawals from Mr. Wilson's accounts. We also have statements from his bank confirming he did not make these transactions." "But Thomas has power of attorney," Amanda protested. "Everything was legal." "Power of attorney requires acting in the best interest of the principal," Detective Jenkins explained. "Taking funds for personal use without consent is a violation of that duty and constitutes financial exploitation. It's a serious offense." Thomas seemed to collapse into himself. "Dad, please. Let's talk about this privately. We can work something out." "We're past that point, Thomas," I said, feeling a deep sadness despite my resolve. "You had countless opportunities to work something out. Instead, you chose to steal from me and plot to discard me when I became inconvenient." Amanda's demeanor changed completely. Her face hardened, the pleasant mask falling away. "This is how you repay us for taking you in? For giving you a home when you had nowhere else to go? We've been caring for you for 2 years while you contributed nothing. Nothing except $175,000 toward your mortgage," I countered. "And speaking of that contribution," I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, Karen Blackwell was placing the large SOLD sign in the front yard. I turned back to face Thomas and Amanda. "What is that?" Amanda demanded, moving to the window. "What have you done?" "I've exercised my legal right to sell my interest in this property," I explained, handing Thomas a copy of the paperwork. "According to our agreement, I have a life estate in this house." Since I've chosen to leave voluntarily, I've sold that interest to a new owner. Karen Blackwell will be moving in next week. Amanda's face contorted with rage. Karen? That horrible woman from down the street? You can't be serious. Completely serious, I confirmed. She's quite excited about the arrangement. She'll be occupying the main floor bedroom, which, as you've both pointed out numerous times, has convenient access to the kitchen and living areas. Thomas was reading through the paperwork, his face growing increasingly pale. This can't be legal. It's entirely legal, I assured him. I had 3 separate attorneys review the documents. Your own agreement, Thomas, the one you drafted, gives me this right. You can contest it in court if you wish, but given the evidence of financial exploitation, I wouldn't recommend drawing more legal attention to yourselves. Detective Jenkins stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, would you like to proceed with pressing charges for the financial exploitation at this time? I looked at Thomas, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to fish, to drive, the man who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Part of me wanted to punish him to the fullest extent of the law, but another part, perhaps the part that would always be his father, couldn't do it. Not at this time, I said finally. I reserve the right to do so in the future. But for now, I'd like to focus on recovering what's left of my assets and moving forward with my life. Detective Jenkins nodded. In that case, we'll need both of you to come to the station to make statements regarding the unauthorized withdrawals. We'll also need a plan for restitution of the missing funds. Amanda looked like she might explode. This is ridiculous. We've done nothing wrong. Thomas put a restraining hand on her arm. Stop, Amanda. Just stop. He looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. I'll come to the station, and I'll pay back everything, Dad. I promise. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, but I took no joy in it, only a profound sadness for what had been lost, what had been broken in our family. I'll be leaving today, I told them. I've arranged for new accommodations. Karen will be contacting you about her move-in date. I turned to the children, who had been watching this adult drama with wide, confused eyes. Lucas, Sophie, come give your grandpa a hug. I'll see you soon, I promise. As I embraced my grandchildren, feeling their small arms around my neck, I whispered to them that I loved them, that this adult problem had nothing to do with them, that we would still have our special times together. Then I walked out of the house with Detective Jenkins, leaving Thomas and Amanda to face the consequences of their actions. As we reached the car, I looked back at the home I'd thought would be my final residence. The sold sign stood defiantly in the yard, a visible symbol of my refusal to be a victim. Are you all right, Mr. Wilson? Detective Jenkins asked kindly. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. Detective Jenkins and Officer Rodriguez escorted me to my car, where my overnight bag was already packed in the trunk. We'll follow you to the station, Mr. Wilson, Detective Jenkins said. I'd like to get your full statement while everything is fresh in your mind. I nodded, stealing one last glance at the house before getting into my car. Through the front window, I could see Thomas sitting on the couch, head in his hands, while Amanda paced furiously, her arms gesticulating wildly. The children had retreated upstairs, confused by the adult drama unfolding on Christmas morning. At the police station, I was shown to a small interview room with uncomfortable plastic chairs and a table bolted to the floor. Detective Jenkins recorded my statement, patiently going through the timeline of events, from my initial discovery of the financial discrepancies to this morning's confrontation. What made you suspicious in the first place? She asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Little things, I replied. Mail that had been opened before I saw it, missing bank statements, comments Amanda would make when she thought I couldn't hear. But the real confirmation came when I overheard her telling someone on the phone that the old man would be gone after Christmas. Jenkins nodded sympathetically. Unfortunately, that's often how these cases begin. Small discrepancies that don't seem important on their own. I handed over copies of all my evidence, the originals safely stored with Martin, bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, records of my Social Security payments being redirected, credit card statements with charges I never made, and of course, the recordings. I understand these may not be admissible in court due to Pennsylvania's two-party consent laws, I said, but they demonstrate the pattern of behavior. You've done an extremely thorough job documenting everything, Mr. Wilson. Detective Jenkins said, sounding impressed. Most victims in your situation don't have half this much evidence. I was an engineer for 40 years, I replied with a small smile. Documentation is second nature. As we finished, Detective Jenkins explained the next steps. We'll be bringing your son and daughter-in-law in shortly for questioning. Given the evidence, especially the financial records, the district attorney will likely pursue charges of financial exploitation of an older adult. It's a third-degree felony in Pennsylvania when the amount exceeds $2,000. My stomach clenched at the word felony. Despite everything, the thought of Thomas with a criminal record was painful. What kind of penalties would that involve? For a first-time offender with no prior record, possibly probation, mandatory restitution of the stolen funds, and fines. In more severe cases, or with uncooperative defendants, jail time is possible, though not guaranteed. I nodded slowly. And if I don't wish to press charges? Detective Jenkins leaned forward. Mr. Wilson, I understand this is your family, and that complicates things emotionally, but financial elder abuse is rampant and rarely prosecuted. Your case is unusually well documented. You could help set a precedent that might protect other seniors. I thought about this, about other elderly people being exploited by those they trusted most. Let me think about it. For now, I want to focus on getting my money back and settling into my new place. Of course, she said, handing me her card. Call me anytime if you have questions or concerns. And regardless of whether you choose to press charges, we'll work to recover your stolen funds. As I was preparing to leave, Officer Rodriguez returned. Detective, the son is here. He came voluntarily. The wife refused to come in without an attorney. Detective Jenkins nodded. Thank you, officer. Mr. Wilson, there's a back exit if you'd prefer not to encounter your son right now. I considered this, then shook my head. No, I think we should talk, if he's willing. Thomas was sitting in the station lobby, looking exhausted and disheveled. When he saw me, he stood up, uncertainty on his face. Dad. Thomas. I nodded to a quiet corner. We should talk. We sat on a bench near the vending machines, both of us staring at the scuffed linoleum floor for a long moment. I don't even know where to begin, Thomas finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. Why, Thomas? I asked, the question that had been haunting me for months. Why would you do this? Was it just about the money? He shook his head, still not meeting my eyes. It started small. We were having financial problems. Amanda's business wasn't doing well, but she didn't want anyone to know. We got overextended on the house, the cars. She suggested borrowing a little from your accounts, just temporarily, to cover some bills. We were going to pay it back before you noticed. But you didn't, I said flatly. No. He swallowed hard. Then it became easier each time. Amanda would say we deserved it for taking care of you, that you'd never miss it with your pension and Social Security. He paused. I'm not blaming her. I'm responsible for my own choices. But she can be very persuasive. I thought about how charming Amanda had been when I first met her, how skillfully she had presented different faces to different people, and the nursing home plans? Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. That was more recent. Amanda started saying it was too stressful having you in the house, that we needed our space back. She found those places, made the calls. I should have stood up to her, but I didn't. I just went along like I always do. I let his words hang in the air between us. His weakness was not an excuse, but at least it was an explanation. Thomas had always been easily influenced, even as a child. It was one of the things Eleanor and I had worried about. I'll pay back every penny, Thomas said earnestly. I've already called the bank about a loan, and I'll tell the police everything. Take full responsibility. What about Amanda? His face tightened. She's calling her attorney. Says we did nothing wrong, that as your power of attorney, I had the right to manage your finances however I saw fit. He shook his head. I don't think she understands how serious this is. And what about us, Thomas? I asked quietly. What happens to our relationship after this? He looked at me directly for the first time. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, Dad. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I want to try to make things right, somehow. I nodded slowly. It won't happen overnight. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. But you're my son. I'm willing to leave the door open, just a crack, if you're genuinely committed to change. I am, he said, and I wanted to believe him. Officer Rodriguez approached us. Mr. Wilson, Your son is needed for questioning now. I stood up. Remember what I taught you growing up, Thomas. Take responsibility for your actions. Tell the truth, even when it's difficult. I will, Dad, he promised as the officer led him away. I left the station feeling emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. The secrets were out, the lies exposed. Whatever happened next, at least it would happen in the light of day. Later that afternoon, I checked into a modest hotel near my new apartment. Martin called with an update. Thomas made a full confession, he reported. Admitted to taking the money without your knowledge or consent. Amanda is maintaining their innocence, claiming it was all above board due to the power of attorney. What happens next? I asked. The DA will review the case and decide whether to file charges. Given Thomas's cooperation and your ambivalence about prosecution, they might offer a plea deal, especially if he agrees to full restitution. And the house situation? The paperwork for Karen's purchase of your life estate interest has been filed. It's legal and binding. Amanda can contest it, but she'd have an uphill battle given the circumstances. I thanked Martin for his help and hung up. My phone immediately rang again. It was Karen Blackwell. Joe, I just had the most interesting conversation with your daughter-in-law, she said, sounding utterly delighted. She threatened to sue me, then offered to buy me out for twice what I paid you. What did you tell her? I asked. I said I'd think about it. Then I mentioned that my sister is looking for a place too, and wouldn't it be cozy if we both moved in? I thought she might burst a blood vessel. I couldn't help but laugh. Karen was exactly the right person for this situation. Strong-willed and utterly unintimidated by Amanda. Don't worry, Karen added. I'll make sure the grandkids have access to their grandpa's room whenever they visit you. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. I agreed wholeheartedly with that sentiment. Despite everything, Lucas and Sophie were innocent in all this. I would make sure my relationship with them remained strong, even if their parents and I never fully reconciled. Over the next few days, as I prepared to move into my new apartment, the situation continued to evolve. Thomas moved out of the house, telling me during a brief phone call that he and Amanda were separating. I need to figure out who I am without her influence, he said, and I need to find a way to make things right, with you and with myself. Amanda, facing potential criminal charges and the prospect of sharing her home with her neighborhood nemesis, finally agreed to a settlement. She would buy out Karen's interest in the house at a premium and repay the full amount stolen from my accounts. In exchange, I would not press criminal charges. It wasn't perfect justice, perhaps, but it was practical. I would recover my financial losses. Amanda would face significant consequences without jail time, and Thomas would have a chance to rebuild his life and, possibly, our relationship. As Detective Jenkins said when I informed her of my decision, justice comes in many forms, Mr. Wilson. Sometimes the best outcome isn't the most punitive one, but the one that allows for the possibility of healing. I hoped she was right. Only time would tell. My first night in the new apartment at Riverside Meadows was strange. After 2 years living in Thomas and Amanda's house, being completely on my own again took some adjustment. The space was modest but comfortable. A one-bedroom unit with a small balcony overlooking a well-tended garden. I'd brought Eleanor's favorite armchair, my books, and enough personal items to make it feel like home, or at least the beginning of one. I sat on the balcony that first evening, watching the sunset and feeling the weight of everything that had happened. There was relief, certainly. The constant tension of living with people plotting against me was gone. There was sadness, too, a deep grief for the relationship with my son that might never be fully repaired. But there was also a surprising feeling of pride. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be a victim. At 68 years old, I'd found a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The weeks following Christmas were challenging in different ways. The legal matters were settled relatively quickly. True to her word, Amanda bought out Karen's interest in the house at a significant premium and returned the $47,000 that had been taken from my accounts. The district attorney, satisfied with this restitution and respecting my wishes, declined to file criminal charges. Thomas and Amanda's divorce proceedings began almost immediately. Thomas moved into a small apartment across town and found a job at a different investment firm, his reputation at the previous one tarnished by the scandal. He called once a week, the conversations awkward at first, gradually becoming more natural. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Reed, a gentleman in his 50s who specialized in helping older adults navigate major life transitions. "What you experienced was a profound betrayal," he told me during our first session. "It's normal to feel a whole range of emotions, from anger to grief to uncertainty about the future. Over time, Dr. Reed helped me process what had happened and begin to rebuild. Your response to this situation was remarkable," he said once. "Many people in your position would have either confronted them immediately, potentially escalating the situation dangerously, or denied the problem entirely, becoming victims of ongoing abuse. You were strategic. You gathered evidence. You sought appropriate help. And most importantly, you took back your power." I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. I had refused to accept the role that Thomas and Amanda had tried to cast me in, the doddering old man who could be easily manipulated and discarded. Instead, I had written my own part in this story. 3 months after Christmas, I agreed to meet Thomas for lunch at a neutral location, a diner we both liked. He looked different, somehow more himself than he had in years. Less polished, maybe, in his casual clothes rather than the expensive suits Amanda had preferred, but more authentic. "I've been seeing someone," he said, meaning a therapist, not a romantic partner. "It's helping me understand how I ended up where I did. How I allowed Amanda to control so many of my decisions, even ones that went against my own values." "That's good," I said cautiously. "I'm not making excuses," Thomas continued. "I made my choices. I betrayed you. That's on me, not Amanda. But I'm trying to understand the patterns so I don't repeat them." We talked for almost 2 hours, covering ground we should have explored years ago. Thomas admitted he'd always felt he couldn't measure up to my expectations, that Amanda had seemed like a strong, confident partner who could help him become more successful. "She knew exactly what buttons to push," he confessed. "She'd say things like, 'Your father was so accomplished at your age,' or, 'I bet your dad never would have hesitated to make this investment.' I wanted to prove myself, to both of you." I was startled by this. I'd never thought of myself as an intimidating figure or someone Thomas needed to prove himself to. Had I somehow communicated that without realizing it? It was something to reflect on. That lunch didn't magically heal our relationship, but it opened a door. We agreed to regular meetings, to keep trying, to rebuild slowly on a foundation of honesty rather than the facade of perfection that had characterized our relationship for too long. Meanwhile, I was building a new life at Riverside Meadows. I joined the resident committee, helping to plan events and outings. I made friends, including Harriet, a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor, and Gerald, a former high school principal who shared my love of fishing. We formed a tight-knit group, often gathering for card games or coffee in the community room. 6 months after Christmas, Amanda pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of financial exploitation. As part of her plea deal, she was required to perform 500 hours of community service at a senior center and attend financial ethics classes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Thomas began bringing Lucas and Sophie to visit me every other weekend. At first, they were confused about all the changes, but children are remarkably adaptable. Soon, they looked forward to our time together, to the puzzles and games we played, the stories I told them about their grandmother and about their father when he was their age. During one visit, Sophie asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandpa, why don't you live with Daddy and Mommy anymore? Did you have a fight?" I considered how to answer truthfully without burdening a 5-year-old with adult problems. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "grown-ups make mistakes in how they treat each other. Your mom and dad and I had some disagreements about where I should live and how we should handle certain things. But you know what's important?" "What?" she asked, her small face serious. "That I still love you and Lucas very much. And your dad is working really hard to fix his mistakes. That's a brave thing to do. Like when I broke your special mug and told you I was sorry?" Lucas piped up. I smiled. "Exactly like that, buddy. Only grown-up mistakes can be bigger and take longer to fix. But we're all trying." One unexpected development in my new life was becoming something of an advocate for senior financial protection. It started when I shared my story with a few residents at Riverside Meadows, several of whom had experienced similar, though less dramatic, situations with family members. Word spread, and soon I was invited to speak to a senior group at the community center about recognizing and responding to financial exploitation. The most important thing, I told them during that first presentation, is to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And don't be embarrassed to seek help. Financial abuse thrives in secrecy and shame. That led to more invitations to senior centers and retirement communities across the city. I wasn't a natural public speaker, but I found that telling my story, helping others protect themselves, gave meaning to what I'd been through. A year after the Christmas confrontation, Thomas invited me to dinner at his apartment. Lucas and Sophie were with their mother that weekend, so it was just the two of us. He'd cooked Eleanor's spaghetti recipe, not perfectly, but with obvious effort. "I have something to show you," he said after dinner, handing me a check. It was for $50,000, slightly more than the amount that had been taken from my accounts. "I know Amanda already paid the restitution," he explained, "but this is from me, separate from her. I've been saving from every paycheck. It won't undo what happened, but I wanted you to know that I'm still working to make amends." I was touched by the gesture, though I didn't really need the money. "Thank you," I said simply. Then, after a moment's thought, "How would you feel about using this to start college funds for Lucas and Sophie instead? A way of turning something negative into a positive for their future." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that very much, Dad." As I approach my 70th birthday, I reflect often on the strange journey these past few years have been. The loss of Eleanor, the betrayal by Thomas and Amanda, and then this unexpected new chapter. There are still difficult days, times when the hurt and anger resurface. But there are good days too, more of them as time passes. I've learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to refuse to accept mistreatment, even from those who should love you most. I've learned that new beginnings are possible at any age. And perhaps most importantly, I've learned that while forgiveness may be a virtue, it must be earned through genuine remorse and changed behavior, not granted automatically. Thomas and I continue to rebuild, one conversation, one shared meal, one fishing trip at a time. We may never fully recapture the trust that was broken, but we're creating something new, something perhaps more authentic than what came before. As for Amanda, I hear she's moved to another state, started over. I wish her no ill will, though I doubt our paths will ever cross again. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Life at 70 isn't what I imagined it would be when Eleanor and I dreamed about our retirement years. It's both less and more. Less because she isn't here to share it with me. More because I've discovered strengths and possibilities I never knew existed. If you're watching this and finding yourself in a similar situation, feeling vulnerable, taken advantage of, or pushed aside because of your age, remember this: you have value, you have rights, and it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and your power. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who weren't treating you right? What did you do, and how did it turn out? Leave a comment below and share your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. I read every comment and appreciate your support. Until next time, this is Joe Wilson, reminding you that the golden years don't have to be tarnished by those who should treasure them most.